You felt it before. That moment when everything finally starts working. You wake up early without hitting snooze. You finish the workout you used to avoid. Your focus sharpens. Your routine begins to feel natural. For the first time in a long time, you feel disciplined. Days stack on top of each other. 3 days, 5 days, 10 days. You start to believe something powerful has changed. You look at your life and think, this is it. I finally figured it out. And for a moment, it feels true. But then something happens that most people don't expect. The streak ends. One small decision breaks it. You skip the workout. You delay the task. You tell yourself you'll handle it tomorrow. And suddenly, the momentum disappears. The habits that felt automatic become heavy again. The routine that once felt strong collapses. Within days, sometimes hours, you're back where you started. And you sit there asking the same question millions of people ask themselves every year. Why do I always fall apart after I start doing well? The answer is uncomfortable, because the collapse didn't start when you missed a day. It started when the streak began to make you feel proud. Success changed something inside you, not your discipline, your ego. This is the part nobody talks about, the danger of a good streak. A streak feels like proof that you've changed, proof that you've become disciplined, proof that the struggle is over. But a streak proves nothing. A streak is not transformation, it's only a temporary pattern. And the moment you confuse the pattern with identity, the collapse begins. Because success introduces a dangerous thought. You begin to believe you've earned something. You start thinking like this: I've worked hard this week. I've been consistent. I deserve a break. That sentence destroys more momentum than failure ever could. Because failure is obvious, but reward feels justified. You don't see it as sabotage. You see it as balance. You tell yourself it's healthy to relax. You tell yourself one day off won't matter. And maybe it wouldn't if discipline were temporary. But discipline isn't a temporary activity. It's a system. And systems collapse the moment you start negotiating with them. Think about it carefully. The structure that created your streak had rules. You woke up at the same time. You followed the routine. You executed the plan. Those rules created momentum. But the moment you reward yourself by breaking the rules, you introduce something dangerous: choice. Choice sounds like freedom, but in discipline, choice often leads to weakness. The moment you give yourself the option to escape the system, your brain remembers comfort. And comfort is persuasive. It whispers quietly, you've already done enough. Missing one day won't hurt. You can start again tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And eventually, the disciplined version of you becomes something you remember instead of something you are. But the real collapse didn't start with comfort. It started with ego. Because success changes how you see yourself. At first, you're humble. When you begin a discipline journey, you feel uncertain. You don't trust yourself yet. You know how easy it is to quit. So you follow the rules carefully. You respect the system. You treat every day seriously. But after a good streak, something shifts. Confidence becomes overconfidence. You stop respecting the process. You start believing the results belong to you,
instead of understanding that the results belong to the system. And that misunderstanding destroys everything. Because once you believe you become disciplined, you relax the behaviors that created the discipline. You stop protecting the structure. You loosen the schedule. You start improvising. And slowly, the foundation erodes. Most people never notice this moment because it feels positive. It feels like growth. But it's actually the beginning of decline. History is filled with people who understood this danger, people who refused to celebrate progress too early. Andrew Carnegie built one of the largest industrial empires in history, but he didn't treat discipline like a temporary phase. He treated it like a permanent operating system. He understood something many people don't. momentum is fragile, much more fragile than motivation. Motivation can disappear and return. Momentum must be protected every single day. The moment you stop protecting it, the collapse begins. This is why people repeat the same cycle over and over again. Start strong, build momentum, reward themselves, lose momentum, start again. Each time believing the next streak will last. But streaks don't last because people treat them like temporary achievements instead of permanent standards. There's a massive difference between a streak and a standard. A streak is something you track. A standard is something you live. A streak makes you proud of the past. A standard controls what you do today. People who rely on streaks are always looking backward. How many days have I been consistent? But disciplined people look forward. What does my standard require today? That question eliminates negotiation, and negotiation is where streaks die. When negotiation enters your routine, discipline leaves, because negotiation introduces excuses. It gives your mind permission to debate actions that should never be debated. Should I work today? Should I exercise today? Should I follow the routine today? These questions should never exist, because standards remove questions. You don't debate brushing your teeth. You don't debate eating. You don't debate showing up to work. These things happen automatically because they are standards. But most people treat discipline like an optional activity, something they perform when motivation appears, something they pause when comfort feels more attractive. That mindset guarantees collapse, because discipline cannot survive in a system where comfort gets a vote. The moment comfort gets a vote, discipline begins to lose. And once the pattern breaks, rebuilding momentum becomes difficult, much harder than people expect, because the brain remembers how easy it was to stop. The first break feels small, but it weakens your trust in yourself. You start thinking, maybe I'm not as disciplined as I thought. Doubt enters the system, and doubt spreads quickly. Soon, the habits that felt natural begin to feel forced. You start relying on motivation again, and motivation is unreliable. Some days it shows up, most days it doesn't. That's why people who rely on motivation are constantly restarting their discipline journey. They live in cycles, short bursts of intensity, followed by long periods of stagnation. But the people who maintain momentum for years operate differently. They do something most people refuse to do. They remove the idea of reward, not because they hate enjoyment, but because they understand a simple truth. Discipline is not something you perform temporarily. It is something you protect permanently. The moment you begin rewarding discipline with comfort, you begin training your brain to escape the very structure that created your progress. And eventually, the brain becomes excellent at escaping. This is the real reason most people collapse after a good streak. It's not because the routine was too hard. It's not because life became too busy. It's because success made them careless. They forgot the humility that created the streak in the first place. They forgot that momentum requires protection every day, quietly, without celebration, without ego. Because discipline is not strengthened by pride. It's strengthened by repetition. Simple, boring repetition. Wake up, execute, repeat. No celebration required, no reward necessary. Just the quiet understanding that this is who you are now. And people who reach that stage rarely collapse because their discipline is no longer a project, it's identity. When discipline becomes identity, the rules change. You no longer chase streaks, you protect standards. You no longer celebrate consistency, you expect it. You no longer ask if you feel motivated, you simply act. Because the person you've decided to become does not negotiate with comfort. That person does not reward effort with escape. That person understands that momentum is sacred. And once you see discipline that way, something powerful happens. The streaks stop collapsing, not because the work became easier, but because the system became stronger than your emotions. And emotions were never reliable to begin with. That is the real difference between people who constantly restart their lives and people who quietly build unstoppable momentum. One group chases streaks, the other protects standards. And standards don't collapse. They continue, day after day, year after year, long after motivation disappears, long after excitement fades, until the disciplined life becomes the only life you recognize. If this made you recognize the pattern in your own life, don't ignore that realization. Like the video if this hit something real. Comment the longest streak you've ever broken and what caused it to collapse. Share this with someone who always starts strong but struggles to stay consistent. And subscribe if you're ready to stop chasing streaks and start building standards that don't break.